What do you think the future holds for this industry?
About photography space, there are people who are quite pessimistic, saying there's no future for it, AI is going to change everything. You don't really need a human being behind the camera anymore to create an image. I'm not as pessimistic. Also, if you're in the wedding photography space in India, I don't think it's changing anytime soon.
How did that switch happen from just being a photographer to opening your own photography studio called Como Studios? And can you explain to our viewers how just being a photographer is different from running a photography studio? What inspired you to do this, and is it like the latest trend as of now?
So, to be honest, this trend has been around for a while. If I don't do it now, it will always be one of those things at the back of my head that I'll think, oh, I was good enough to do that professionally, but I never took a chance.
I also wanted to ask you, how is the content creation space affecting the wedding photography business? Hi all, welcome to the Strategic Pulse. I'm your host Darshan Praveen. Today we are speaking to Lavanya Ullas. She is a practical example of how one can turn their passion into their profession. In this episode, we will deep dive into her journey, the business aspect of the wedding photography business, and practical advice on how one can turn their passion into their profession. Stay tuned and watch the entire episode. Thank you. Hi Lavanya, welcome to the show.
Hi Sudarshan, thank you.
So what inspired you to take up photography as a career, and how did Como Studios come to life?
So that's a long answer. Photography was always a hobby for me for the longest time. It became a fairly serious hobby. It became a skill that I honed over many years, thanks to travel, thanks to an interest in viewing the world. Making it into a career was never on my mind. So for the longest time, for over 10 years, it just became a serious hobby. It helped me understand the world around me. It helped me understand the countries I was visiting and make sense of it by what I captured. So it helped me view the world and understand it differently. Making it a career, it was one of those things with I think a lot of people struggle with in the creative space. You have a hobby, you're good at baking, you're good at painting, anything. Right. Could I do it someday? Could I not? It's something we all struggle with.
Right.
I reached a point several years later where I had enough skills to confidence in the space to think I could charge for it, meaning it is at the professional level, no more at the hobbyist level. I still sat with it for a few more years, didn't make the jump for the usual reasons of fear of safety, risk, all of that. And then one day it was, if I don't do it now, it will always be one of those things at the back of my head that I'll think, oh, I was good enough to do that professionally, but I never took a chance. So when I reached that point, I made the switch.
Okay.
And the story is a bit longer, but that's the point I made the switch. I was living in Singapore at the time. I moved back to India. I thought I would try it for a few months on my break before I go back. And then it was COVID.
Okay.
So I was here.
Okay.
I committed to the career. I committed to the place, Bombay. And then I chose it, or it chose me. Yeah.
So before taking up photography, I think you were working in a corporate job?
Yes.
And you were in the HR field. So how did that transition happen to getting into photography? Like you said, you always had that passion of traveling and capturing those places. But was there any trigger point ki chalo, this is something which I'm very good at, and this I can probably make a career out of it?
Yeah, I think there was a moment when this happened. So when I was in Singapore in about 2018, I was up for a change in my role and like a switch within the company, which would mean more responsibilities and a longer commitment for a few more years in the role. My story is not one where people were burnt out of the career, didn't like the job, frustrated, and therefore chose the creative passion. I loved the job I was doing. I was working for a great company. I got along with everyone there. I was stimulated, engaged, etc. But it reached a point where I thought, like I said earlier, that if I don't do it now, never, or what else is there? Reached a ceiling with which, the happiness money can bring. There was a sort of ceiling I'd reached, but beyond this, it was not going to be cumulative. Like more money, more success isn't going to relate to the same amount of happiness.
Wow.
So it became time for me to take a break and reset. Something I've done before. After 3 years of working in my first job, I took a break, traveled for a year. Then after that, 6 years, I took another break. So this became a periodical thing I did. So 2018 became a time to take a break, a sabbatical, go, think, reset. So I took a trip, solo trip across Russia and Mongolia, doing the long train journey. It's called the Trans-Siberian Train. It's the longest train journey in the world.
Oh.
So I did that for 6 months, traveled, photographed, spent a lot of time alone by myself, knowing that it's probably time for a switch. Until that point, I didn't know it will be photography, to be very honest. I just thought it's a time for a switch. Will it be India? Will it be somewhere else? Will it be a startup? I just knew I was itching to do something different. After that trip, I landed back in India to meet family and friends, take a break, stay here. The photographs from that trip got published in a magazine here.
Oh, wow.
The Russia, Mongolia, Trans-Siberian trip. So that was interesting. I got another gig through those photographs to shoot, for which I got paid for. So it was something fun I was toying with on my sabbatical. I still had my job back in Singapore to go back to. They had kept my visa open and the job opportunity open still. So it was something I was toying with, and I thought it's now or never. So it's a few little things that added up. When you look back in hindsight, you said, yes, I can see the connection. I was always meant to do this. But it was those little things that confirmed it's now or never. It's now or never. And I thought, okay, I have to do this now. And I committed to it. And then, like I said, 4 months later was COVID. So that was just not the best time to start your business. But yeah, that's how it happened.
Do you come from an entrepreneurship background?
No. I think 15 years ago, when everybody does an MBA in India as a rite of passage. Not really. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. If you asked me then, I would have said, no, I wouldn't be an entrepreneur. Even now, I don't identify with that title.
Okay.
I'm just someone trying to do something I really like and make it work. I don't think of myself as an entrepreneur, though technically I probably am. Yeah.
Okay. So your approach to wedding photography is quite unique. You capture the moments without interrupting the ceremonies. So what inspired you to do this, and is it like the latest trend as of now?
So to be honest, this trend has been around for a while. Okay. It is shooting an event, a wedding, a story in a photojournalistic or documentary style. This style has been around for the longest time. Initially, the photojournalists for newspapers, when they cover really sometimes challenging moments like war and so on, you have to be able to photograph without interfering in the scene. That's where the principle comes from. So the documentary photography into weddings has been around for a while. In India, I could be wrong, but maybe 15 years ago, it probably started becoming a little more popular. What we know as candid photography is technically shooting documentary photography, which is without disturbing the scene. You shoot it as is.
Okay.
And then you frame it and light it and so on, but you don't create a moment, you shoot the moment as is. So that style is not new at all. It has gained a lot of popularity in India, which is why sometimes in the industry you would hear things like traditional photographer, candid photographer. A lot of those terms come from this distinction. So I'm not new. I'm one of the last few people to do this space or this sort of style in India. But it's gaining a lot of popularity, and I think, it's not a manufactured moment. So there's a lot more rawness, authenticity, beauty, joy in photographs like that, as you would know from Supriya's wedding photos. Yes. So that style has been around for a long time. It's the one that I identify with most, and it just felt the most natural fit for me because my starting point, the 10 years of photography as a hobby, was in travel and was in documentary, where you don't create a scene, you just shoot things as it happens. Street photography is another genre which is very, very popular in India, been around for ages. And it is shooting the scene as is. You never try and change it, fix it, manufacture it, even move things.
Okay. So like you said, you started photography, you started capturing moments when you were traveling. How did that switch happen from just being a photographer to opening your own photography studio called Como Studios? And can you explain to our viewers how just being a photographer is different from running a photography studio?
So the switch from photography to Como Studios, I suppose shooting different genres like travel, documentary, stories, weddings is something I would say I stumbled upon. Weddings brings all of that together. It's documentary, it's events, it's portraits, it's a mix of all different genres. It's even street photography if you're just shooting what's happening around the scene. So weddings brings that all together. I have to say I stumbled into the first couple of weddings because someone said, I love your work, I love your travel work, I love your street work, could you shoot my wedding? So literally that's how it happened. And given the size of the industry weddings is in India, it's huge. So you shoot one or two weddings, it just snowballs into weddings. What surprised me most is how much I enjoyed it. There is a little, between other genres of photography, there is a little distance people try to maintain from wedding work because traditionally it's been a lot of, you shoot it rather conventionally. People sometimes assume there's not a lot of creativity in wedding photography, but that's not true. So there is a bit of distance other genres, people from other genres might maintain from the wedding function, but wedding genre. But me getting into it was, I sort of stumbled into it, and that's how Como Studios was born. I initially, the first, I say 2 or 3 weddings, I shot entirely by myself. And since you know what Indian weddings are like,
Wow.
you can't shoot it solo.
Absolutely.
In the West, you can shoot weddings alone. A lot of photographers do take on weddings because
Right.
there are 40 people, 50 people, 70 max. That's a big wedding. Here, the first 2, 3 weddings I'm shooting alone. They were, however, 190, 100, 120 people weddings, so they were not massive. But yeah, that's how I first started, and then I grew a team, and then I thought about a brand name, and all of that sort of came after. I can't say everything was ready, packaged from day one. Yeah.
So you started as a photographer, then you understood that you cannot run this alone by yourself
Yeah.
if you have to do it at scale, especially for weddings. So you started hiring and you built a studio around it.
Yeah.
So the difference between being a photographer and running a studio is you essentially form a company, you hire people, and then you go about shooting it.
Yeah, and I think there's, quite often a meme that, like what my parents think I do, what I think I do, what my colleagues think I do. There's one for photographers or wedding photographers, where people think I'm shooting all the time and enjoying and partying and drinking. No. You're doing accounting, you're doing invoicing, you're checking this, you're hiring, you're training people. And then maybe 20-30% of the time, you're a photographer.
Right.
So the biggest difference is you take on many different hats. I think sometimes there's a misnomer among younger people, I think, that if I really enjoy doing this, I'll do this professionally and that's
Right.
all I'll do all day.
Right.
No, you will be doing many other things apart from this actual one skill you're good at. When you start a business, you're doing, like I said, accounting, you're doing billing, you're doing marketing, you're doing sales, you're doing all kinds of things outside of that skill. That's something I think doesn't probably get talked about a lot. Not a lot of us know how much photography you won't be doing when you become a photography business owner.
Right.
But then you have to find the right team, delegate, ensure you're still creatively as engaged and stimulated, and you're not burnt out by all the other tasks that are so non-photography related. Yeah.
So, like you said, you have to start hiring, you have to learn other skills as well to run the business. How do you approach hiring? How do you hire in your company? And I believe it's a woman-led, woman-powered company. Is it fair to say
Yeah,
that?
I would say I try and hire more women. To be honest, the challenge is hiring the right people. I think finding people with skills is not that difficult in India. There are
Okay.
lots of freelancers in the editing, video, photo space. I think finding the right people that you click with who match your style is probably the difficulty that you'll face than just finding people enough. Like you would know with any job search website.
Right.
You'll get hundreds of applications. That's not a challenge. It's finding the right application. It's the same in the photography space. When I first moved back to India and I started working with a lot of freelancers, one thing that was quite apparent to me that in this space it's heavily male dominated.
Right.
A lot of weddings we go to where as guests, you see a large team of mostly guys dressed in black, shooting, crowding the space, all of that. So that for me felt, okay, there's something off. Where are all the women in this space? So I did come across a few women. Often in a team, there's at least 1 or 2, sometimes women, videographers and photographers. So I started connecting with them, building relationships with them, working with them, training them. And then that's how the team sort of organically became more women-centric or women at the front of it. There are, of course, other male members in the team.
Right.
But a huge focus on working with women has been something I've consciously worked towards. That's from noticing that something's missing, noticing something different. Where are the women? And I think quite often we bring a different aesthetic to the wedding space, to the families, to the people, the relationships we build. We have more access. There's a different sort of sensibility we bring.
Right.
And the lens we bring as shooting video or photo as women, I think. So that has helped make a huge difference. And the most amount of feedback I get are always from the aunties and uncles at the weddings who come and talk about how great it is that we have an all-women team or mostly women team and how amazing it is and how they've never seen it when they were growing up or when they got married and how they love seeing it now. So it's very empowering when you hear that from that generation. So that's...
What other challenges did you face when you were building your studio?
I think you spoke about hiring. I think some of those challenges are there. It's it's a heavily crowded space with a lot of freelancers. So sometimes finding people with the right work ethic that match your style of shooting and match your work ethic, because like any skill based sort of sector in India, you would know that you have like people who can be highly professional and highly not. I think sometimes the challenge is like they can do a great job, they don't, and you can't control that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think the wedding space is a bit like that. So you have to set the standards for your team and you have to train them in the same way, hold them to the same standards that you hold for the clients, showing up on time, being a certain way, all of that. So that can be a challenge if they don't have the same work ethic. That in hiring has been, I think, one of the difficulties, I would say.
Okay. So a lot of people, right, especially in the creative field, I'm sure they must be having this idea that I'll become a photographer. And it's usually a passion for them and they don't usually take it up like a full-time career, or they do not really progress as much in that field. So, and you are one of the few examples who have converted your passion into a proper full-time career and making money out of it. So what advice do you have for those people who are still struggling with their passion and don't know how to take that leap of faith and do it full-time?
So I think the advice I would give for anyone who has a creative passion and wants to make that leap is, I think, educate yourself properly out of all the risks and what that career would look like. Build a stable, if you do currently have a job in another field, build some security for yourself so you can take the ups and downs that come with early years of an entrepreneur. I'm not so encouraging. I think people don't hesitate to take the leap. I think people do take the leap quite often, but they're not prepared for the pitfalls or the risks that come with it. So I think educate yourself a lot more as much as possible as to what that looks like. I'd say for any sort of creative person, whether it's someone who enjoys cooking and wants to start a full-time, like a restaurant or a cloud kitchen, anything, keep your stable job as far as you can until you build this skill enough to bank on it completely. If you can juggle both, I would say do both, because there is a pursuing your creative passion without putting the pressure of also getting your, daily livelihood from it. There's a different level of investment in that.
Yeah.
We can get carried away with how we can't wait for this to be a full-time career, but then we're often sometimes surprised by, that's not what I'm all doing. I just don't have to keep photographing all day and magically everything will happen around me.
Right.
So, or cooking every day or baking or painting. So I think educate yourself as much as possible and build a security around it so you can take some of the falls. So like I said, if you do have a stable job, keep it. Pursue this on the side. You'll be surprised by how well you can juggle both. And then you can get your skills up to a certain level that there is no turning back. That definitely you're one of the better ones in the game. And you can't possibly keep these two jobs because you're so busy making money from this. And then I think leave that. Also spend a lot of time talking to other entrepreneurs and getting some information as to what it looks like, what are the challenges you face, because a lot of us, when you start a business, you're doing it alone and your friends are not necessarily in the same industry. I certainly had no friends in this industry. So a lot of the pitfalls, how it is moving back to India, working in Bombay, I never lived in Bombay before. What does the freelance market look like if you're trying to hire from them? All of that I learned through trial and error, and sometimes you may not want to do that. So yeah.
So, like you said, you started out alone and your first few weddings you captured it yourself. How did you get those first few weddings?
I think those were, I want to say Iktan Royce was the first one. Word of mouth. I think someone saw my work, the travel work, the documentary work, and say, hey, would you be open for a wedding? This was a couple, Iktan Royce. I still remember them. I remember the names of all the couples I photographed till date.
Wonderful.
They were having a small, intimate wedding. They lived in the US, actually no, Canada, and they were having a vegan wedding. I think I'd never seen that before. They wanted to personally make every decor item, like, everything was sort of DIY-ish, very sort of, yeah. So they also wanted to bring in like the photographer. I think it was more homegrown, they didn't have like a massive budget. They wanted to be much more like an intimate wedding in the true sense. So somebody said, hey, this is the kind of wedding. And I said, 100%, I'll do it. And of course, like initially you budget accordingly so that it makes sense for them and it makes sense for you to get your first wedding gig, and it went from there. And we're still in touch till today. They just had their baby a few months ago. They were visiting India. So that's the kind of like, that's how it started. And then you get the first wedding ever portfolio to show, and then you build it from there, and then eventually you have enough to build a website and so on. So it goes from there. It's a little organically. I wouldn't recommend that to everyone. I think I was on a break. I wasn't, I didn't like quit everything and put full on investment into it. I would have approached it differently. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have like my 5-year projection. It was just, let me see if this works. I wouldn't recommend that for everyone in every field. I think weddings is big enough in India to sort of wing it a little bit, but not everywhere else. Yeah.
So let's say that somebody is starting out right now and they can probably learn from your journey. What advice do you have for them? What pitfalls should they avoid? How should they go about planning for their 5 years, like you said? And what is the best marketing tool they can start with to grow their business?
In the wedding photography business? I think get excellent at your craft. By that I mean know everything there is about not only wedding photography. I think get excellent at photography and then think about weddings. I think people get expert at wedding photography, but then that just tells you how to, get certain cliched shots right. But when you can master other genres and bring that skill into weddings, then your work suddenly stands out. There are hundreds of people trying to, just perfect wedding photography. They know the portrait, they have the same angle, you look here, she looks at your eye, she holds your hand a certain way, but that's not going to push the bar in any way. So get great at your craft in other genres. Study photography, look at photographs from other spaces, street, travel, documentary. So get really good at it. Shoot as much. If you're trying to get into the photography space, I think work with great people. There are lots of big names in the business. They're always looking to collaborate with people. They'll meet with, if they have the right bent of mind. When I first moved to Bombay, there were a few other wedding photography labels that were open to have a coffee with me. So I just said, I'm here, I'm exploring the wedding space, I'm getting a few inquiries, but I'm not really sure this is my genre. They were very nice to meet with me for coffee. Not everyone is. It depends on your approach. Also understand what your strengths are. I think if your strength is that the local language and you're very good with families that you speak Marathi, then hone in on that and make that your genre. I think don't try to be what you see other people doing. Reflect a little bit what is your strength. My strength, I think, from what I understand, is talking to couples who are usually planning their own wedding, who've been together a certain time, they've been dating, they want more fun photos. Yeah. I know I click with them. I'm not going to click necessarily with people who have a 2,000 person wedding where the families are organizing it and the couple is not really that involved in the planning, but they're just going with the flow. I am not the best fit for that couple, and they're not really going to choose me based on the work they see. Right. So I'm not going to pursue that. I know what my strength is, and I think reflect a little bit. We're trying to be whatever we see online quite often. I think change that and know what your strength is. It might be just doing a lot of, like I said, local weddings, more the Maharashtrian weddings. You speak Marathi, you get along with the relatives, you can, quickly get assimilated into the family, then hone that. Let's focus on that. Don't try to be a destination wedding photographer if that's not your strength. Yeah.
And the best marketing strategy would be word of mouth itself, or is there any
That's not the best marketing strategy in terms of money. It is the most effective marketing strategy for me. Like my weddings often come through word of mouth. If I've shot one wedding, then I met a friend there, I know them, we click and so on. It's not the most effective when you want to do volume in weddings. I think that right now is definitely social media.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any specific platform on social
media? It's a visual medium. Look at the platform we all spend the most amount of time. It's Instagram.
Okay.
So I think it's there. It's also trying to narrow down your niche, I think. You want to connect with the right people, because some of the challenges that people face, from what I understand with other colleagues in the industry, is like, oh, we did this, but they were expecting some other photos, but I shoot like this, or they didn't, they're unhappy. So it's like, no, did you share what you do well? I think that's a communication problem. It's not just the client being difficult problem. You have difficult clients, but often it's a communication problem. If you haven't shared what your photos are going to look like in detail or what your style is, then there is a misunderstanding. Okay. So I think understand your niche, and then your best marketing tool, which I should do more of, is Instagram. Yeah.
Instagram. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get to the business side of it a bit. Like how much does it typically cost to set up a wedding photography studio, and what are the various costs involved? Where all do you have to invest in? How long does it typically take to get break even and profitable?
Move. I'm not sure I can answer a lot of those questions. But how much does it cost? It can cost very, very little to no money to a lot. By that I mean that the barrier to entry in the photography space or wedding photography space is negligible if you have a camera. So at the very least, you need a basic camera.
Okay.
From there, the cost can go up to anything. You can have a nice studio where people come down, they meet you, you have all these big screens where your team is sitting and editing, or you don't have an office and you just work on a project basis and meet the clients outside. So it can be a
Can you give
number.
like a range for someone who's starting
A good
out?
camera costs anywhere between like, I don't know, 2.5 to 3 lakhs right now, maybe 2 lakhs. Right?
Okay.
That's your bare minimum to start
Okay.
a wedding.
Okay.
Now you need a few of those cameras and a few more people, right? So that's your minimum cost.
So say like a 5 lakh budget is enough to get cameras and get the business started?
Sure, yeah. But then you would end up needing, your money to market, how are you going to get the first client? But to get your basic couple of cameras, start shooting, I think so.
Okay.
Very often you might reach a limit as to how far that can take you, and then you look at investments in other areas. But it doesn't need to be a large studio where you have a large team in-house, which some of the brands do have. That's where you want to also position yourself. Do you want a studio where the couples come in and they're amazed by everything they look at and then you charge accordingly? So those are different, like where you want to be a price point and what USP you're at. But yeah, I would say at the minimum, if you have a decent camera, you can start.
But say they have 5 lakh rupees and they're starting, they've invested in cameras. Besides the cameras, is there something else which also they have to invest in, or they're just good to go?
Actually, I take that back because you can also rent cameras
Okay.
for $1,000. So literally, like I said, your barrier to entry is very little.
Very
If
low.
I had a wedding to shoot tomorrow and I had like very little money to invest, I could rent a camera for I think 1,000 or 2,000, shoot that wedding, give it back, and then edit. So you can do it as minimally as possible.
But say at
if
a
you
studio
wanted
level,
to. Yeah.
like since you're running a studio, you're hiring people, you have the labor cost, you have equipment cost.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to set up a studio and they're already a photographer, they're doing well, and now they want to switch into a studio, so what is the costing like for that?
A physical studio where
Yeah.
you would have shoots there.
Yeah.
So that would be different from the wedding space. That would be more for fashion and product, where you'd had a physical studio. For weddings, you don't need a physical studio typically. You
Right.
shoot on location. The physical studio could vary. I think then you're looking at rentals and location where it's there. And are you shooting enough to use it every day as a rental? You would be better off than renting studios by the hour or by the day to shoot that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would be, I think, a different space if you're doing a physical studio. And yeah.
And if they want to stick to wedding
Yeah.
photography as itself, then how does that business work? What I'm basically trying to ask is, if somebody new or somebody established who's a decent photographer and wants to step into the studio world, seeing this podcast, they can probably understand the costing aspect of it. Like from your personal experience, how much have you invested in your studio? What are the typical margins you generate per wedding shoot? I'm asking from those angles.
Right. So for someone looking to start off, I can advise. For someone established, I don't know if we can tell them how to go about it. Someone looking to start has a decent camera and is like, okay, I want to enter the wedding photography space. My recommendation would be get as much experience under your belt as possible. Work with as many other wedding brands. People are always looking for photographers to join their team per wedding basis or per season basis or per year. Try and get as much experience as you can under your belt, because on the ground experience of shooting a wedding, getting to know different kinds of wedding, different cultures within India, different sizes of wedding, different styles, there's nothing like that than making you more experienced. No amount of online tutorials or no amount of just getting the photos online and listening to that will help. On the ground experience will hone your craft way better than any other sort of learning experience. I think you don't necessarily need a physical studio. Wedding photography is so much on location. You do need a solid team, and you do need some like online softwares which are really good, and I think you're good to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long does it typically take to edit a wedding album, and how long does it take to deliver the same to the client? This is the most asked question on Google, so that's why I'm asking you.
How long does it take to edit?
I mean, not how long. How long does it take to deliver the photos back to the client? Because usually,
I think it's a lot of wedding couples wondering why their photographer has not sent them the photos,
Correct.
and they're googling how long does it typically take.
Correct.
I think for us, we give like a timeline of 4 to 6 weeks, and I deliver way less than that. For me, it's always over promise and no. Under promise, over deliver.
Yes,
Yeah, that's the one,
under-promise.
not the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, under promise, over deliver is how I work best. But I think there are people who deliver within 3 to 4 days. There are people who deliver within a few weeks. It all depends on the sort of scale of team and the kind of machine you're operating. If you're operating a lot more customized, like I'm going to look at each image, edit it, have my hands on it myself before I send it to you, then that's more time. It's like you can have a shirt that's made within a couple of days, or you can have a tailor-made suit in a few weeks. It's not the best analogy, but it's something to that effect, right?
Right.
So again, depends on the kind of business you're running, what you are looking to pay for. You want someone where you're meeting the same person who's shooting your wedding, and that same person is going to be there when they're delivering photos. Or you have the experience of you talk to somebody, you talk to the salesperson, somebody else is delivering the photos, and the one who's running the business is not really in touch for your wedding. So they are operating a much larger machinery. So they have someone just churning out the editing photos within a few days, versus someone else, a more boutique-ish, customized studio is going to take more time, but you are going to get much more involvement in the editing of the photos.
Okay.
So that's typically where it falls. I think with any industry, you have people that operate a larger scale, and then they can churn out things a lot faster, like editing.
Right.
So for us, I'd say 4 to 6 weeks is typically what I say, and it's always less than 4 weeks I deliver.
Okay.
Something I tell the couples only when they book us, but yeah, people vary. There are some people who take, I think, 3 months or something, because they're way more, like it's handcrafted, edited, color toned individually. It just depends on what they're offering.
And how should the studio understand how much should they price their work? Like, because when somebody is starting out and they're working with different kinds of clients, how does the pricing strategy work here? Is there any benchmark?
No, there'll be people who shoot a wedding for very little, and there'll be people who shoot for a lot. I think quite often in India, with any of the skill-based space, quite often, not always, you kind of get what you pay for. So if you are someone shopping purely on the price point, eventually you will meet someone who's going to shoot your large wedding for this fee, but you might get what you're kind of paying for. So then you're also compromising on maybe quality, or how long they shoot, or they might time themselves by the hour. Like we don't time ourselves by the hour.
Right.
I don't have an 8-hour shift that I ask you for, and then it spills to 10 hours, and I'm like, no, my team needs to go. No, things run late. It's an Indian wedding. Nothing runs on time. So even Supriya, your sister's wedding, where we were there till like the evening, and Supriya and someone were tired, and so on. So we stayed till the end.
Right.
That's how we operate. So the price point is a tricky one to answer, because I think today in India, you'll find someone who'll shoot your wedding for any price point you have in mind. Your friend will often shoot it for free.
Okay.
Yeah, there are people who get their friends to shoot their wedding because he's a good photographer, he has a camera, you kind of get what you're paying for sometimes. And then you have at some level where, you want the photographer who shot a certain celebrity's wedding to shoot yours, and you're willing to pay anything for it. So you have every kind of customer in India, and therefore you will have a similar price point. If you're starting off, you price yourself based on what your demand is like. There's zero demand because you started off. You price yourself enough to make it competitive. You also, if you have an understanding of your own skills, I think that's really good in the creative space to be able to look at your work objectively and decide, where do I stand? I'm not quite here, but I'm here. Am I a 7 on 10? If you can understand your level of work, look at your contemporaries or your competitors in that skill or price level and see what are they pricing at. I need to be a little more competitive so that I get the work initially. Then in my second year, I can match that fee.
Right.
And then in my third year, I can, increase that. I think that, but you should be able to look at your work objectively and know where you stand. Okay. So don't price yourself too low when you're starting off, but you have to get that work in. And the minute your demand is increasing, you can up your pricing.
Can you give in numbers, because some range, so that you'll have a fair idea of what we are speaking? Or there's no standard number as well?
No, like I said, I know a lot of couples who have asked their friends to shoot their wedding, for free. And that friend shot the first 5 weddings for free, got enough of a portfolio under his or her belt, and then started charging. So then that's anything, right? You can
Okay.
Yeah,
So there's
that figure can be anything. It was 0 for the first 5 weddings, and then it was X amount for the next 5, and then eventually you see, okay, the challenge, I think, and the nature of the industry in India is that there is a price point everywhere. Like, you can find someone to shoot your wedding for 25,000 or for 25 lakhs. It just depends on where do you fall in the bracket and how much are you willing to spend. But the advice, I know this is not an advice for couples who are getting married, but the advice for wedding couples is, if you have a certain budget range, then start assessing the work within that budget range of all the people, and you will see some differences if you start seeing the difference in quality. So when I started off, I know my one thing that I was very sure about, I am the most economical option among this level of skill. I knew from my work that at this skill, I know I'm not charging as much as my contemporaries because I am new to Bombay, I don't have a network, and various other reasons I'm starting off. So, and I think that's why people would see my work and be like, okay, this is definitely good. And then you shift that accordingly based on the demand coming in and the inquiries and so on. But you have to be able to reflect on your own work. If not, get an opinion of another experienced photographer saying, hey, can you look at my work and decide how good is it? Where do you think it lies? And they should be able to help you out. Like a mentor, someone to review your work would be a good advice, yeah.
But how somebody who's starting out, and if they don't have any networks, then how can they find a mentor? You just reach out randomly, you're saying, to somebody senior, and you just message them.
Yeah, if not, then ask to work with them, ask to collaborate with them. Just like, hey, can I join you on a shoot? I mean, how skilled are you? How open are you? Can I just assist you on a shoot? I'd love to learn. Like right now, there are a couple of other non-wedding projects I'm working on. I would love to find a photography student or someone starting off who wants to assist me on the shoot. And I would love to train him or her on everything I know about lighting and setting up a portrait shoot and so on, because I'd be happy to share that information. What I need is a good assistant who's going to, stick with the shoot, which is sometimes tricky to find.
Right.
I can, of course, pay for someone to just assist me loading up the lights and so on, but it would be great to have someone who's wanting to learn, because that relationship is different.
Right.
So if you are starting off new, you have no wedding portfolio, you want to become a wedding photographer, message a few other wedding photographers, see what their need is. You need an assistant. I can work for 5 hours. I won't charge anything. Let me come and help you out. Just by observation, being there, your kind of approach, the work ethic you bring, you'll be surprised how open to it people are if you show up and bring that same energy.
Right.
If you're sending out 100 messages saying, hi, I'm a wedding photographer, I'd love to work for you, this is my CV, that's a little, you get the amount of interest you put into it.
Right.
Like I said, when I came here first to Bombay, I messaged a couple of people. I mean, Sam and Ekta, they're one of the biggest names right now in the wedding photography space. They've shot a lot of celebrity weddings. This was already 5-6 years ago. I messaged them like, hey, I love your work. I can see you've also done travel and documentary. I'd love to meet for a coffee and understand the wedding space. 2 days later, they came and they sat with me, had a coffee, and we chatted about it. They told me about their journey, the workshops they've done, where they aim to be. And today they shot Farhan Akhtar's wedding a few years ago.
Okay.
And they did a few other celebrity weddings. They're one of the biggest names in India right
What's
now.
the name?
Sam and Ekta.
Okay.
And I'm really thankful to them. They, spared a couple of hours, sat with me for a coffee and happy to chat. I think something they also mentioned, it's the kind of message I wrote where they responded to. This is India. We get hundreds of messages from people every day saying, I want to work with you, this is my CV and so on. My message was very, I think, from the heart. I don't want to brag, but it was very, I'm here, this is what I do. I'm curious about the photography space, especially weddings. Can I pick your brain? Can I meet you? I'm happy to assist on the shoot. I just want to ask a few questions. And they're like, we loved it. Come, let's chat.
Okay.
Yeah. And we've sort of maintained an online friendship, so to speak, since then. But so it kind of works. It, like I said, the interest you put in, you get back quite often. Yeah.
That's quite wonderful to hear. And like you said, once you start running a studio and you make a business out of it, photography is probably the 30-40% aspect of it. So how do you manage other things along with it, and how do you avoid getting burnt out?
Yeah, that's a good question. Recently I met with a friend, again, he's now quite a big name in the wedding photography space, Mark Swaroop. He and I went to college together. He shot Deepika Padukone's wedding thing.
Oh, wow.
So that's his huge big, he's an excellent photographer. So Mark and I were talking about it, where you can't help but feel burnt out by the end of it. It's the kind of industry where you're doing so much of it during the wedding season. You're completely pulled in different directions. You barely sleep. There are times in an entire wedding shoot that you wouldn't have had any water, right? And you're eating at the very end of the day. So you're completely exhausted. So then you're going back, you're editing, that cycle continues. So it's very easy to feel burnt out. also when something like this, which was such a creative little pursuit that brought you so much joy, when it kind of puts you through the ringer, it's very hard to find that same joy over and over again.
Right.
You do the same thing. You've seen so many weddings, you've seen the rituals and so on. So it kind of becomes automatic at some point, not in the negative way. So you have to pause and find, that sense of joy that you had while you pursued it. It's not always easy. And I think something I've realized and something I'm working on this year is to do your little side projects which remind you why you're here. Some little things for yourself in the photography space. Also, delegation a lot of the tasks that you don't want to get. You're spending a lot of time, but it's not really needed at times. It can be delegated. I think as small business owners, entrepreneurs, you want to do everything yourself,
Right.
especially small business owners.
Right.
You stretch yourself thin by wanting to do everything yourself. You have to stop and decide which parts you delegate, which parts not, and still keep that little fun bit, that joy you got from just doing that.
Right.
Keep that aside for yourself. Otherwise, it's easy to get burnt out. Yeah, and I think especially with weddings being a seasonal thing, like the last 6 months of the year, it's a very common thing. Like no sleep November, no sleep December among wedding
really?
photographers because even Supriya's wedding, we were up
Yeah.
at 6 a.m. So we left, I think, at 8 p.m. or something. So it is like, that's a long day being on your feet and shooting. But it's the norm and you do it. Like, you're not, there's no one to complain about. You chose this. You can't complain about it to anyone.
Right.
But you have to take care of yourself. And I think health, one of the things also I've realized is you can't do this without actually taking care of your health and working out and trying to sleep where you can and making sure those little things, eating, hydrating is important. It's the unsexy stuff of you're the passionate job that you have, but you have to look at things like that. Physically, it's quite demanding.
I also wanted to ask you, how is the content creation space affecting the wedding photography business?
I think because of the amount of time people spend on social media and how much we consume content today, it's had a huge impact also on the wedding space. To a large extent, I think the wedding photography industry is sort of divided on this. A lot of people complaining about it, saying, okay, now we're expected to make reels and shoot in the vertical format, because traditionally purists of photography will say it's shot in the landscape format, like
Right.
traditionally all the photographs. Vertical is something that's become popular because of Instagram. And there are people who resist that change and there are people who follow that trend. And I think you can't fight it. I think content creation is here to stay. So you have to decide what you're comfortable getting involved in, making reels, shooting in the vertical format, to what extent, and what extent staying true to the art form as you understand it. So it's a balance. You can't really fight it. Today we also have couples sometimes coming in and asking for one person in the team dedicated to making reels or content that they can share. I think the rise of content creators and influencers has made a huge impact. Today we also have way more access to weddings that we see of celebrities and famous people. We heard they got married, but we
Yeah.
had no idea what they wore or how
True.
their wedding looked like. It was a very private affair.
Yeah, right.
Today we have access to that. And if you see, sometimes there's one famous couple that gets married, and you'll see a lot of weddings that year will have similar outfits, decor, looks. That's unfortunately the world we live in. So content creation, social media has a huge impact. You can fight it, you can resist it and stay pure, or you can find a balance and somewhere draw the line saying, okay, you will get this much, but our wedding films are still going to be in the landscape format. This is how we shoot best. And also educate your clients. They're coming at it from maybe an understanding of social media, and you say, okay, I can do a couple of vertical videos, but the entire wedding film is best viewed horizontally. Look at this film. This is how we shoot this way. And your eyes see better. Your eyes are seeing in a 35mm landscape vision all the time. It's not seeing vertically. So if you educate them a little bit and find a balance, I think it's fine. It's not the end of the world. And it's all trends. And also another big thing is trending music and, seeing the current trends. We want to incorporate this. This is, I think, a bigger challenge than finding the content creation space. People expecting the trends that they see and wanting the same things incorporated in their photos and film. There, I think you can play a bigger role in talking to them about longevity. You're not shooting your photos and film to look at tomorrow. You are shooting these photos and paying for someone's skill to shoot your photos so that you can look at these photos 25 years down the line and reflect back on this day. That is why you're shooting. Some sentimental people will say you're shooting these photos for your future kids, but That is why you're shooting. And the trends today is not going to outlive that period. So you do want something more classic, you do want something much more emotion based. You don't want to follow the trends because they won't survive the 10, 20-year mark. And same with the films.
What do
So,
you think the future holds for this industry?
I think with wedding photography, there are people who are quite about photography space. There are people who are quite pessimistic, saying there's no future for it. AI is going to change everything. You don't really need a human being behind the camera anymore to create an image. I'm not as pessimistic. Also, if you're in the wedding photography space in India, I don't think it's changing anytime soon. Weddings are huge in India. They are going to survive any sort of, I think, pandemic, lockdown, any of that. So I think that's going to continue. You want to make sure you're staying up to date on changes in the space and technology without being too pessimistic and just getting on it. It's still a people's business. It's quite people-centric. Right. Weddings still happen. People still, I assume, fall in love and want to commit to each other. I don't think that has changed in millennia. The versions they do it in and the format they do it in might have changed. The size of it might have changed. But weddings is ultimately two people coming together. And I think that's not going anywhere. Appreciating photography, wanting to document that special moment in time has not gone anywhere as long as photography has been around. So I think I'm not as cynical about it, but you want to stay a little more informed about how the space is changing. So the future of wedding photography is there. It might not look the same. It doesn't look like how it looked for our parents.
Right.
When you look at our parents' wedding albums, none of those photographs resonate today.
Right.
But ultimately, the documentation of two people coming together and the joy behind the families, that stays. The format of it might be different. So that's how I feel, yeah.
And are there any perks of shooting wedding photography besides the monetary aspect of it?
Apart from the monetary, there's nothing. No, I'm joking. There are some perks you get to have. I mean, people spend a lot of time planning the menus for food and so on. Ultimately, you eat at the very end of the day, so not always. But you do get to have some great food that people have put together. You also get to spend some time in great locations. I think for me, the biggest perk is I've made like a bunch of new friends. There are people who you resonate with and you connect with, and you're having a great time on one of their biggest days of their life. There's music, there's food, there's joy, there's dancing, and you're doing your job alongside it. So I think these are all the different perks. It's a great party at the end of the day when finally the wedding culminates, or the sangeet, or whenever everybody's enjoying. You're also kind of having a good time. You're holding a camera and you're capturing the joy, but you're moving through the dance floor, you're watching everybody dance, and so it's a great time overall, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what's a major misconception about wedding photography that you would like to clarify, which people have in general?
Okay, what lay people have in general about wedding photography is that it's that all it takes is just click a button and capture the moment. Like, it's very simple. So anyone could sort of do it, and we don't understand why the skills matter so much, or why someone's charging so much, or what it means to have that kind of experience in the industry. And I think because photography has become such a normalized thing, we are the most photographed generation ever in the history.
Absolutely.
We have like hundreds of photographs. The value of a photograph is heavily reduced now.
Yeah.
We have hundreds of pictures. We might have even taken today of ourselves that we never look at again.
True.
That wasn't the case for our parents, right?
Yeah.
So I think because of the value of the photograph being diminished, there is a misunderstanding that it's also easy to do wedding photography. But there is years of experience to get that one perfect shot when the bride is looking at him and she has a tear in her eye and he's smiling and he reaches out to wipe. There's a skill behind capturing exactly. It's observation. It's getting your settings right. It's a bunch of things that you have to have the experience to shoot. It's not that easy. So I think understanding that difference, like what am I paying for? What is this experience resulting in? Sometimes it's a lot about educating the client or the couple into what good photography can look like.
Okay.
Because we've been desensitized to photos so much that we just think it's all good. But then pointing out the difference between an okay photo of the vows or the fairas versus a great photo is years of experience and how you see it, how you shoot it, how you capture it. Yeah.
And what's the most challenging wedding photography you have covered, and how did you overcome that? We would love to hear a funny experience as well.
I don't know, most challenging, I would say I've been fairly lucky, I know, talking to other colleagues of mine in the industry. that I've been very lucky with the weddings I've shot. I'm friends with almost all the couples I photographed. I'm still in touch with them. So I've not really had a bad experience.
Okay.
The funny experience I had recently in a wedding that we were shooting where, so a lot of my weddings when I've shot, like one wedding I've shot the siblings' weddings and then like the best friend's wedding and so on. That's usually how most of my work comes through. So I was shooting this wedding, Mishika and Alfred, and they were doing their entry. It was a Catholic wedding reception, and there's always a lot of dancing and hoopla when they do the entry with the family and so on. So we were shooting, and then it was really high energy, and we were shooting, and I was going backwards, and we were shooting. Suddenly, I hit the platform of the dance floor with my ankle, and that sent me flying with my camera.
Whoa!
And I went flying back and landed on the backside, and slid because the dance floor was really smooth. So I landed and I slid.
Okay.
And it was in front of everyone because everyone was gathered too for the entry. But I was completely fine. I jumped up, went back to shooting. But it was a really funny incident. And even now when I meet someone, this wedding was in Bandra, so I've met people at other gigs or other events and they remember me. They're like, oh my God, yeah, that photographer who fell on her ass. So it's one of the funniest things that's happened to me because I'm usually pretty careful about things like this. But tripping, falling, and then flying back with the camera was, I think somebody has it on film as well.
Okay. Was there a pivotal moment in your life that changed everything for you?
Regarding photography?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sort of break I took in 2018 to travel and spend time with myself, I think that slowly resulted in very small tweaks in my life. So I've got a little turn here, then that resulted in something else, and a little incident there resulted in another gig. Then that little project that I did in photography resulted in something else. So I wouldn't say it's one big pivotal moment, but those series of moments have led to a shift. Like I didn't think when I lived in Singapore, I would move back to India and work here. I didn't foresee that in my future. Of all places, I didn't foresee that in Bombay. I have no connection to Bombay before this. I grew up in Bangalore and that's home. It's where my parents still live. So I didn't foresee coming to Bombay.
Right.
And so a little series of incidents has led to that. I think COVID is a big decider as well for me. I started my business and I thought, okay, let me see how photography goes for a year. And then, I committed to it and that changed a lot of it. There are absolutely no regrets. I love the life I've built here in Bombay. I love the space I'm in and the business I've built. And that comes from certain decisions you've taken and certain things that have happened that are out of your control, like COVID. So, and I think it's the biggest disruptor in a lot of people's plans.
Right. Yeah, we have had other guests as well who came in and said that COVID has changed their life for the good.
Yeah, it changed my life. I think for the good, we'll have to wait and see. But it's a good leveler for a lot of people and disruptor in a lot of people's lives. Yeah.
So, like you said, you have no regrets, but knowing where you are right now, would you do anything differently if you had to start over?
I think so. I think I'd plan a little more. I think I've been a little bit of, I'd be a little better plan in the beginning. I don't think anyone could have planned for what a lockdown and COVID and how that affected your business. So there's no way to plan for that. I think a lot of the skills, how I organize things, how I do my systems today are all learned through trial and error. And I think maybe if I'd been a better prepared, done all the things I spoke about today, like talk to somebody else in the business, understand, what are the systems to be in place, how would you hire? A lot of that I learned on the go. I think it's a lack of network and maybe an interest in mind to go at it alone and believe I can do everything. So a little bit of that I would change and be a bit more organized and have those systems in place from day one. Yeah.
And how has the transition been from working in a corporate job to running your own photography studio? Like, what gets you hooked on to entrepreneurship?
I think the biggest change is, of course, the stability. I think because I worked in the corporate space for over 10 years before I made the switch. So you have a bit of a career under your belt. And by that, you have stability, security, financial security. I was living on my own in Singapore and stuff. So you give that little bit of stability up for what is a journey which comes with its ups and downs and not a lot of visibility of what the next year or two can look like at any point. So you give up that, but what you gain is you gain a lot of time where you can decide where you focus on. The same 10, 12 hours that you spend working for a company. And if you're working for a good company, not in a job that you find draining, you're still giving a lot of your time there.
Absolutely.
You turn that around and you give that time for yourself. This was my biggest, I think, motivation, where I'm working really hard in a job that I really enjoy and I'm giving it 10 hours a day or whatever. I could give that to myself and believe. I reached a point where I believed I could bank on myself. That did not come to me at 22, at 23, at 25. That came to me much later in life. But I had to do that job for many years and build a career for many years to gain the confidence that I could bank on myself. I wouldn't have had that if I had taken a leap. If I jumped into photography straight out of college, maybe it would have happened, maybe not, but I wouldn't have the work ethic I have today because of the corporate job I had.
Absolutely, yeah.
I wouldn't have the experience, the confidence, knowing how to deal with clients, knowing how to draw the line. I think knowing how to have a boundary, like, I'm sorry, these are the terms of how I work. And this is being able to say that comes with experience that I built in a different industry. And I think that's another advice I would give to a lot of people starting in the wedding photography space is if you can talk to people outside this industry, talk to people where you can build your work ethic, understand the world outside of freelancers' work, because that looks very different. Because sometimes it can be myopic. In the wedding space, this is how it's done and this is how it's always done, gets thrown around a lot, like in other industries. And you want to do things differently. You want to set standards. If you want to charge a certain price point, I think that's a challenge also people face, where how do I increase the pricing? How am I not always lowballing just enough to get work?
Correct.
Bring the standard that no one else is bringing. Bring that sort of work ethic. Bring that level of skill that no one else is bringing, and then you can charge more. But if you're doing enough that everybody else is, because this is how it's always done and this level of editing is okay or this level of shooting is okay, you can turn up late. No one comes at 7 p.m. at the reception. No. If the clients have 7 p.m. reception, we turn up at 7 p.m. No one's ever there. Everybody comes at 8:30. But that's my standard.
Right.
The client tells me 7 p.m., the team is there no matter what. And then it's their prerogative to come late, start early, because things happen, I understand that. But then I bring this standard, and therefore then the client also understands, okay, you bring this standard and they treat you differently. But if they say 7 p.m., you come at 7:45, then you're kind of establishing a standard that it's okay and it's a bit lax. And then you can't be, hey, you got to pay on time. Like, we understand you have a bit of a low standard. So I think what you bring often you can expect from the other person. So these are the skills you can learn. If you're a freelancer, you have to pick up these skills, maybe working in a different industry, spending time with other people, I think other entrepreneurs. You have to be working with people who can learn skills. And I think that's the biggest advice I would give. So if I hadn't had this career outside, I wouldn't be able to bring those standards and the skills and experience I have into this space. And that's helped me. I don't think I would have been the same person if I had jumped into this field at 22 and be like, I'm a photographer, I want to get into weddings. No, everything else, it would have been a longer struggle for me to learn this over the years. Yeah.
And what advice do you have for couples to plan their wedding photography?
I think one of the main advice I give all the couples that I talk to, because like I said, quite often the couples that find my work interesting or are attracted to the kind of work I do is couples who are involved in their own wedding, they care about photography, they're a little more planning their ceremony, hands-on. Biggest piece of advice I always tell them is plan everything to the nth detail you want. 24 hours before the wedding, decide you're done. Your job is over.
Okay.
Delegate, tell everybody it's their problem. Don't bring any detail to me, because on the day, you don't want to be the point of contact for any decisions. Because you decide and you plan for a year, and if you don't give that up, you can't enjoy what you've been planning. You're still an event planner on the day of your wedding, which is quite frustrating, and it's overwhelming, because on the wedding day, you're getting pulled in multiple different directions. Everybody's stand up, it's a great, happy day, but they're also demanding a lot of your attention, conversation, hugging, physically, like there's a lot being drained out of you. And if you have to also still be planning and making decisions of your wedding day on that day, no. So I tell them 24 hours before, look at each other and decide, that's it. We've done what we can. Any other decision, it's somebody else's problem. Parents, brothers, sisters, they're going to decide. We're just going to have a good time. That is the way you can truly enjoy your wedding day, because you've been so involved in the planning. If you don't give that up, you'll still be planning and executing it on the wedding day, which is not fun.
Right.
And before you know it, you're just still deciding, okay, the food hasn't come, where is the priest, why is this not tasting good? No, enjoy your day and tell everybody it's not. That's my advice for weddings. About wedding photography, I think decide what your style is. Spend some time looking at photographs, have an idea, what resonates with you. For some people, it is the heavily posed editorial, like very magazine sort of fashion shoot wedding. Great, that's your style, identify with it, and then go look for people who do that. find out what your style is. Something else, more candid, more documentary, more raw, more emotional. I'm not into posing, but I can appreciate great photography, but I don't really want to stand and pose a lot. That might be the couple that likes your work. So find out photographers who do the style you like, and then of course then hone in on your price and budget. But I think you can do both.
Okay.
If you only have a budget in mind, then find a style after. I think find out what resonates with you.
Okay.
Definitely look beyond social media. Second advice that I give couples is, you've seen the work on social media, but quite often, like with our personal social media, it's just the highlights of our lives. You can't assess a person just looking at his or her social media. That tells you nothing about their personality.
Absolutely.
It's just their best moments.
Yeah.
Try and look at their work in more in depth. Try to see a wedding album or a wedding set. So then you can see consistency, skill. Does it translate across the entire photo set? If it does, then you have someone who's skilled on your hands. But if they just put the 5 best photos from a wedding online but everything else looks a bit average, you have your answer. It's like meeting a great guy on the dating app and he looks amazing when you meet him and he can't hold a conversation. I don't know if that's a good analogy.
No,
but
it is.
You want something more in depth. So that's look at the work in more in depth. So look at a full wedding set. The planning thing I mentioned, and also the budget and the style. Understand what your style is. If you don't know what your style is, then shop around, look at a couple of wedding photographers. If you like someone and their budget doesn't fit, the quote doesn't fit your budget, and that's like if it's a deal breaker,
right,
ask for recommendations. Because quite often then I might know someone who's up and coming in the industry. You might be willing to do it at your budget, and I think he or she is skilled enough, maybe not quite there, but ask for recommendations. We kind of know everybody else in this space, and I've often done that for up and coming wedding photographers who message me to work with me, and I know they're new in the city or new in the industry. I've recommended them if the budget is not, if it's a deal breaking criteria.
Okay. What's a fun thing about wedding photography which people don't know about?
I think if you're you don't have to be a people's person, like an extrovert, but if you have any sort of interest in humanity, emotions, understanding why people are the way they are, weddings gives you a great insight into that. You are in the middle of a lot of emotion and happiness, of course. Sometimes drama, sometimes, the friends and they're joking around, sometimes there's family drama. Like, you're in the middle of it, and I thrive on that. I'm a observer of this is why humans are the way we are. Like, I can see this person is like this because of this dynamic. And for me, I observe, she lights up in a different way when she looks at her friend, and I can see that. So I'm watching that to photograph it. So for me, there's nothing more exciting in being in the wedding space, because I completely thrive, and that's the way I shoot. I can see how you look at Supriya when she's getting emotional at the wedding, and I'm spotting that. So next time you do that, I know I want a photograph of that. So things like that, I like for me. The actual when you tie the mangal sutra, of course we'll get a good photo of it,
right,
but that's a performative action of the wedding. The fact that all your favorite people are around you, and you get your 100, 200 favorite people in the world around you to celebrate it. There's a lot of emotion flying around. There's a lot of unplanned moments, and that's what gets me excited about. That's what I find most exciting about shooting weddings. Yeah.
And like you also said, nowadays candid moments are being captured a lot. So have you ever walked into a private or an awkward space just to capture a candid moment?
I think with how I shoot, we're always around from the minute things start happening, which is the minute you're up doing hair and makeup, till the very end. So I have to be honest, I'm not often accidentally walking into anything. I'm just there all the time shooting everything. And I think you would remember, at least Supriya would remember this from your experience, like I'm there all the time that things are happening. So not accidentally, but what I do end up capturing, which a lot of couples have said, is the small little moments, which is the hugging, the wiping of the tear, that little gesture, which I don't think they knew someone is capturing. I think they weren't aware it's being photographed. It felt very emotional. In fact, at Supriya's wedding, early morning, there's a great shot. I think of her grandmother in the sunlight and Supriya praying, and in the shadow of her aunt. And I'm like, this is 3 generations in one frame. So there's things like that, which I'm not sure anyone planned for, or they even knew was being photographed. Okay. So things like that. I don't know if it's the most interesting composition or interesting photograph, but it is for me, because I look at 3 generations, morning light, and Supriya's like praying and stuff. So I think things like that I enjoy capturing. Yeah.
So this almost brings us to the end of the podcast. My last question for you is, if you had to choose any specific location in the world to capture wedding photography, which location would that be? Anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world? I mean, I would choose something random like, I don't know, Alaska or something, only because I haven't seen many wedding photographs from there. My favorite place would be New Zealand if I could shoot a wedding in New Zealand. That
Okay.
would be great. I think these two. Alaska because no one else is shooting there. New Zealand because it's an amazing, beautiful country. And I would love to shoot a wedding there. Yeah, these two.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lavanya, for joining us. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thanks, Sudarshan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode till the very end. I hope you found this episode to be valuable and insightful. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, as your support will help us grow and bring you more insightful conversations. We would love to hear from you. Please share your takeaways from this episode in the comment section below. We are welcoming entrepreneurs from all walks of life. If you or someone you know would like to feature as a guest in our podcast, then please fill the Google form as seen in the description below. We will reach out. Thank you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.